Some tragic stories you think couldn't get worse, but you know what they say, the devil's in the details. And the stories of these actors' tragic ends have some specific details that are bound to break your heart.
The story of Dr. Hang S. Noor is one of the most inspiring and tragic in Hollywood history. Born in Cambodia in 1940, Noor was a trained doctor who was unfortunate enough to live through the horrific reign of Pol Pot. One of the worst despots of the 20th century, Pol Pot was the leader of Cambodia's Khmer Rouge government in the late 1970s. He was largely responsible for the Cambodian genocide, which killed as many as 2 million people. During the genocide, Noor lived in a forced labor camp where he was tortured and lost both his wife and unborn child. Noor eventually escaped Cambodia and made his way to the United States, but the experiences traumatized him. Once in the US, Noor was cast in the movie The Killing Fields, which takes place amidst the Cambodian genocide he had endured in real life. He was cast as a Cambodian-American reporter Dith Pran and won an Oscar for his outstanding performance.
I know his heart. I love him like my brother. And I do anything for him. Anything.
Sadly, Noor was killed on February 25, 1996, while he was parked in his car outside of his home. Authorities found him shot to death by 3 members of the Oriental Lazy Boy street gang, who were all later given life sentences in prison. The killers were all in their early 20s and also from Cambodia. Little Rascals icon Carl Switzer was tragically gunned down on January 21, 1959, by a friend named Moses Bud Stilts. Switzer and Stilts were partners who owned a bear hunting guide business together, but had fallen out over financial issues. Switzer thought that Stilts owed him money and confronted him at a California home, and the two ended up fighting over a pistol, which went off and killed Switzer. Switzer reportedly thought that Stilts owed him $50, though it seems that Stilts may not have agreed and refused to pay the money. The two were both under the influence of alcohol at the time of the shooting. Though Stilts was arrested by police and charged with Switzer's death, he was acquitted of self-defense as it was ruled a justifiable homicide under California law by a jury. Switzer had come to prominence in Hollywood as a child actor, appearing as a beloved character Alfalfa in the comedy short series Our Gang from the 1930s and 40s. Switzer continued his career in Hollywood, racking up well over 100 credits by the time of his death. When Bertrand Cantat released his new album in the fall of 2013, there was some pretty understandable outrage, but it had absolutely nothing to do with Cantat's musical abilities. 10 years prior, on August 1, 2003, Cantat had attacked his former mistress, French actor Marie Trintignant, and beaten her to death in a fit of rage. The two were staying in Lithuania, and authorities detained Cantat after Trintignant was found severely injured. At the time, Cantat was the lead singer for the French band Noir Désir. He initially denied doing anything wrong. The couple had gotten into a fight on July 27th, and Trintignant was in a coma for nearly a week before she passed away on August 1st. A year later, Cantat was convicted of killing Trintignant and sentenced to 8 years in prison. However, Cantat was released from prison on parole in October 2007 after serving less than half of his sentence. Marie was 41 years old at the time of her death. She had been very popular as an actor, having won multiple awards for her performances. When Dorothy Stratton was murdered on August 14, 1980, her career in Hollywood had just started to get underway. Born in 1960, Stratton was killed by her estranged husband, Paul Snider, who had been the one initially responsible for Stratton's success by getting her signed by Playboy when she was just 18. Originally from Canada, the couple moved to Los Angeles to pursue her modeling career. By all accounts, Stratton was an incredibly charming young woman, but the same could not be said about Snider, who often rubbed others the wrong way.
He was not on the up and up. You know, if you shake hands, you count your fingers after you do it.
The two got married in June 1979, just before she hit her big break, but there was already trouble in the relationship. Stratton felt dependent on Snider, but he displayed misogynistic tendencies and appeared to be unfaithful to her. Eventually, the two started to move apart as Stratton began to excel in her career, which upset Snider greatly. Soon, Stratton was living with filmmaker Peter Bogdanovich, who had written her into a movie he was making called They All Laughed, which would be released after her death. While they were separated, Stratton agreed to meet with Snider at his house to work out a divorce agreement. Snider subsequently murdered Stratton before dying by suicide himself. Stratton was only 20 years old at the time of her death. While Stephanie Mosley might not have been the biggest star, she was still fairly well known in Hollywood when she was murdered on December 8, 2014. Mosley was killed by her husband, rapper Earl Hayes. Police came over to investigate a shooting after receiving a call from a neighbor who said he'd heard around a dozen shots fired early in the morning in their apartment. Both were reportedly dead by the time the SWAT team showed up. Hayes appeared to have killed Mosley before dying by suicide himself. While it wasn't entirely clear what Hayes' motive was for killing Mosley, the couple had recently been separated, potentially over infidelity, though they were reportedly trying to work things out and get back together. Mosley was appearing on the show Hit the Floor on VH1 when she died. Mosley's credits mainly included doing dance and choreography work for singers such as Beyoncé and Britney Spears, but she also had more than a dozen acting credits, including a role as a cheerleader on Ashley Tisdale's show Hellcats. Acting since 2003, Mosley was 30 years old when she died. Lana Clarkson was a 40-year-old actor who was murdered by the once famous record producer Phil Spector in 2003. While she was not a huge draw during her career, she still had notable roles in a few films. Her last credit was in 2001, a few years before her death. Clarkson and Spector had met on the night of February 2, 2003. She voluntarily accompanied him to his house in California. According to prosecutors in Spector's murder trial, Clarkson spurned Spector's advances early the next morning on February 3rd, which upset Spector so much that he shot her to death. The Spector claimed that she had died by suicide and denied shooting her. However, immediately after killing Clarkson, Spector reportedly left the house and confessed the murder to his driver, who would later relay his words to the police.
As soon as he opened the door, I jumped, went to the back door, and he was standing in the door with the gun in the hand.
Police arrested Spector the night after the murder, but he was able to get out on $1 million bail while he was awaiting trial. 20 months later, prosecutors charged Spector with murder, but the first trial ended in hung jury when they could not get a conviction. Upon retrial, the 69-year-old Spector was convicted of murder and given a sentence of 19 years to life in prison. In 2021, Spector died at age 81 while still incarcerated in a California state prison. Judith Barcy was a child actor who, by the time of her death at age 10, already had an impressive 25 acting credits to her name. This included her role as Thea in Jaws 4: Revenge. She also starred in 72 commercials, helping her to bring in a six-figure salary at her young age. Beneath the success, however, Judith was suffering an abusive relationship at the hands of her father. For years leading up to Judith's death, Joseph Barcy had threatened to kill her and her mother, by one friend's count saying so at least 500 times. Joseph was also physically abusive to Judith. Joseph and Maria had fled the Soviet Union in the 1950s to settle in Los Angeles, but the couple's relationship quickly began to sour, partly over Joseph's drinking. They separated after she filed a police report in 1986 alleging abuse and verbal threats, though no legal action was taken against him. According to police, Joseph shot both Judith and Maria before burning their bodies and dying by suicide at their home in San Fernando, California. Though he got a late start to his acting career, Thomas Jefferson Byrd was a widely respected and admired actor when he was shot to death at age 70 on October 3, 2020. Born in 1950, Byrd did not get his start in the acting industry until he was already in his early 40s, but he finished his career with more than 30 credits. This included a number of Spike Lee movies, most recently the director's TV series She's Gotta Have It. He was also a Tony Award nominee in 2003. Witnesses suggested that the shooting may have taken place over an argument that Byrd allegedly got into at a local store, but police could not confirm this. A break in the case came a few weeks later on October 16th when 30-year-old Antonio Rines was arrested in connection with Byrd's death. He was charged with felony murder and sentenced to 20 years in prison. On June 10, 2016, the world was shocked by the news of the murder of singer and actor Christina Grimmie. Grimmie had shot to fame by singing on her popular YouTube channel and appearing on the reality TV competition show The Voice. She had also just acted in her first feature film, The Matchbreaker, which was released just a few months after her death. Grimmie was in the middle of an autograph signing when she was murdered by 27-year-old Kevin James Loibl. She had just performed a set of music immediately prior to the autograph session at a venue called the Plaza Live in Orlando. Loibl died by suicide after he was tackled by Grimmie's brother following the shooting, and police found more weapons and ammunition on him afterward.
Just don't understand why he would do this to her.
Grimmie was only 22 years old when she was murdered and had her entire career ahead of her. After her death, her brother Marcus Grimmie began the Christina Grimmie Foundation in her honor, which helps victims of gun violence. On February 27, 1985, prominent TV actor David Huffman was stabbed to death by a 16-year-old after attempting to stop a car burglary. Huffman had begun his acting career back in 1973. He mainly worked on TV, though he was also in a few movies. A teenager, Gerano Samano Villanueva, was breaking into vans near where Huffman had been parked. After hearing a commotion, Huffman was told that Villanueva had broken into a motorhome, and he drove after Villanueva, trying to stop and detain him. Once Huffman reached the young teen, he and Villanueva got into a struggle. It ended with Villanueva fatally stabbing Huffman twice. Despite their difference in age, the 39-year-old Huffman was only a little bigger than the 16-year-old Villanueva, and it was not Villanueva's first run-in with the law. Villanueva was given a 26-year-to-life sentence for Huffman's murder. In 2011, the San Diego District Attorney reported that Villanueva had been denied parole and would not be eligible again until 2026. Merlin Santana was tragically murdered in South Central Los Angeles just as he was primed for his breakout. Born in 1976, Santana was most widely known for his starring role on The Steve Harvey Show, where he played Romeo Santana for 122 episodes from 1996 to 2002. He had also obtained roles on a number of other major shows, and he had recently started making the jump from TV to movies. Sadly, that was all cut short on November 9, 2002, when Santana was shot to death while sitting in a car with his friend. The circumstances surrounding his death appear to revolve around a 15-year-old runaway named Monique King. Apparently, Santana and King were at a house that night when King falsely claimed that Santana and one of his friends had made unwanted sexual advances on her. She left the house and got two of her older friends, who then came back and shot Santana while he was in the car. The killer, Damian Andre Gates, was sentenced to 70 years to life in prison. King was remanded into custody for 8 years, and the other accomplice received a 23-year sentence. Santana was only 26 years old at the time of the shooting.
At the time of her death on August 9, 1969, Sharon Tate was 26 and a rising Hollywood star. In 1967, she was prominently featured in 4 films. Among them was The Fearless Vampire Killers, directed by her future husband, director Roman Polanski. In July 1969, Polanski and Tate, who was pregnant, were living in the home of record producer Terry Melcher in Benedict Canyon. With Polanski away on a film shoot, Tate shared the house with 2 friends. Just after midnight on August 9th, all of them, plus a visiting friend and a passing driver, were brutally killed. The victims were bound together with rope, and the word pig was written in Tate's blood on the door.
One officer summed up the murders when he said, "In all my years, I have never seen anything like this before."
The killings were carried out on the orders of cult leader Charles Manson. The crimes, their most famous victim, and their mastermind have been the subject of countless books, articles, and documentaries since, and inspired Quentin Tarantino's 2019 film Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Phil Hartman was a fixture on television in the 80s and 90s. Hartman first broke into comedy as a member of the Groundlings and collaborated with Paul Reubens in the creation of Reubens' iconic character, Pee Wee Herman. Hartman was a standout on Saturday Night Live for 8 years and voiced several popular characters on The Simpsons. After leaving SNL, Hartman got his own star vehicle, the sitcom News Radio. Behind the scenes, Hartman was beloved by his peers for his fatherly manner, but his marriage to his third wife, Bryn Omdahl, was troubled. While they both reveled in being parents and remained married for over 10 years, the relationship was strained by Omdahl's drug and alcohol use. For his part, Hartman was often away for work and could be emotionally withdrawn in the face of conflict.
He had mentioned to Bryn that, maybe I can get you a part. And when he'd come home, say, "Oh, I forgot."
Things came to a head on May 28, 1998, when Hartman was killed in his bed by Omdahl, who was later found to have alcohol and cocaine in her system. After telling a friend what she'd done, Omdahl died by suicide. Bob Crane's big break came with Hogan's Heroes. While the show was sometimes critically panned, it was a massive hit with audiences, and Crane was twice nominated as Best Male Comedy Lead at the Emmys.
Hogan, just because you're wearing my uniform doesn't mean that you're me.
Good. I was afraid this uniform might be contagious.
The success of Hogan's Heroes allowed Crane to live a luxurious lifestyle. He indulged his sexual appetites, leaving his wife of 20 years for his co-star Sigrid Valdez. But not long after, CBS canceled Hogan's Heroes, and Crane went to work as a touring stage actor. He regularly traded on his celebrity to pull off sexual conquests, and even began filming his bedroom exploits.
He loved women and he loved cameras. You put them together, there you go.
In this, he was aided by video salesman John Henry Carpenter, who sometimes joined Crane for a threesome. On June 29, 1978, the 49-year-old Crane was found beaten and strangled in his bed. His friend John Henry Carpenter was the prime suspect, but despite circumstantial evidence pointing in his direction, no warrant was issued. Carpenter was eventually arrested in 1992, but he was acquitted by a jury for lack of evidence during his 1994 trial. He died 4 years later, and Crane's murder remains officially unsolved. Before Charlton Heston, Ramon Navarro was the actor identified with the role of Ben-Hur, courtesy of the silent epic Ben-Hur, A Tale of Christ. Originally from Mexico, Navarro became associated with great romance. In his private life, Navarro was gay, a fact he struggled to reconcile with his Catholic faith. Although he resisted studio pressure to enter a sham marriage to improve his image, he was reluctant to discuss his sexuality, even with his closest friends. With the coming of sound, Navarro's career declined despite his classically trained voice, and he developed a dependence on alcohol. In his final years, Navarro was comfortable but reclusive. He regularly hired young men for sex, though he had a reputation as a kind, lonely man who simply engaged in conversation with his company before passing out. On October 30th, 1968, Navarro invited 2 such men into his home, brothers Tom and Paul Ferguson. The Fergusons were convinced Navarro had a large stash of money somewhere in his house and viciously beat him when he repeatedly and truthfully claimed otherwise. After 22 blows, some with a cane, the brothers left Navarro on his bed, where he choked to death on his own blood. The Fergusons were sentenced to life in prison, but both were released and eventually reincarcerated for unrelated crimes. Rebecca Schaeffer was a rising star in the 1980s. Her sitcom, My Sister Sam, only lasted 2 seasons on CBS, but it made her famous.
I'm Patty Russell, and this is my sister Sam.
She was poised to close the decade with an audition for The Godfather Part 3, but Schaeffer never made it. On July 18, 1989, she was killed by her stalker, Robert John Bardo, an obsessive fan of My Sister Sam who was fixated on Schaeffer. He hired a private detective to track down her address, went to her home, engaged her in a short conversation with an autographed picture in hand, then came back to shoot her. Schaeffer was just 21 years old. Schaeffer's murder shook Hollywood. The Screen Actors Guild lobbied for new privacy laws, and celebrities became more aware of the potential dangers of unstable fans. Bardo was sentenced to life in prison in 1991 and remains there as of June 2023. On November 1, 2006, 40-year-old Adrienne Shelley was found in her Manhattan office, hanging from a shower rod. Although footprints found at the scene didn't belong to Shelley, her death was initially ruled a suicide. However, her husband, Andy Ostroy, refused to accept the ruling. At the time of her death, Shelley's career as an actor and director had been gaining momentum, and she and Ostroy were raising a 3-year-old daughter. Ostroy was right. Within a week, it was discovered that Shelley had been killed by Diego Pilco, a construction worker working in the apartment below. Pilco and Shelley argued over the noise he was making. When Shelley said she was calling the police, Pilco first tried to dissuade her, then restrain her. He claimed that he killed her with a punch to the head, then staged the hanging in an attempt to cover his crime, although the prosecution maintained that Shelley showed no signs of a head injury. Decades later, Ostroy directed a documentary on his late wife, Adrienne, which included an interview with Pilco.
Part of me died that day.
Speaking with The Guardian, Ostroy explained, "The point of that interview was to get the truth of what happened that day, and also to humanize Adrienne for him, so that he understood all the moments that Adrienne missed." Sal Mineo caught 2 breaks early in his career. He understudied and later performed as the Crown Prince during the initial run of The King and I on stage, and he co-starred with James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause in 1955. The film brought Mineo legions of fans and an Oscar nomination. When Dean died tragically young, Mineo inherited the mantle of cinema's leading troubled teen. He earned another Oscar nod in 1960's Exodus, opposite Paul Newman, but after that, Mineo found good roles few and far between. Then, in 1976, Mineo found a fresh challenge on the stage. He was coming home from rehearsals on February 12th when he was attacked outside his West Hollywood apartment. Eyewitnesses reported a white man with brown hair fleeing the scene, leaving Mineo with a fatal stab wound. No arrests were made for 2 years, at which point delivery man Lionel Ray Williams was arrested in Michigan for passing bad checks. He allegedly boasted about killing Mineo, and his wife told police that Williams had been covered in blood that February night in 1976. But Williams was a black man, and some observers, including Mineo's family, had doubts about his guilt even after his conviction. Born in Ireland, William Desmond Taylor started out as an actor, but came to fame as a silent film director. By 1922, he was president of the Motion Picture Directors Association. Taylor was held up by studio bosses as a paragon of the film industry at a time when various groups regarded Hollywood as a malign force on American morality. However, Taylor's private life included numerous affairs and a wife and daughters he'd run out on. Hollywood was shocked when Taylor was found dead on February 2, 1922. While initially reported as a natural death, police arrived to find the 49-year-old Taylor with a gunshot to the back and a group of Hollywood notables combing through his house.
Paramount executive was burning papers in a fireplace, and there were reports that a silent screen star was rifling through his desk drawers.
Taylor's murder, sandwiched between the scandalous trial of Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle and the drug-related death of actor Wallace Reed, intensified negative perceptions of Hollywood. Officially, Taylor's murder remains unsolved, but suspicion rests on Charlotte Shelby, mother of Taylor's lover Mary Miles Minter, who allegedly confessed that her mother killed Taylor. Susan Cabot's biggest claims to fame as an actor were a run of B-movie westerns in the 1950s and a romance with King Hussein of Jordan. But Cabot's career faded relatively quickly, and though she kept herself financially stable through real estate and car restoration, her private life deteriorated as she aged. She spent her last years as a recluse, endured episodes of poor mental health, and remained a controlling and erratic force in the life of her son, Timothy Scott Roman. Roman was raised in an often squalid home environment and was given several controversial drugs, partly to counter his dwarfism. On December 10, 1986, Cabot was beaten to death with a weightlifting bar in her home, and Roman was charged with the crime. He initially maintained his innocence, claiming that a burglar wearing a ninja mask had killed his mother. But with police evidence suggesting otherwise, his defense focused on his unusual upbringing and mental health issues. Roman later admitted that there was no burglar, but maintained he didn't remember killing Cabot. In 1989, Roman was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter. There was a touch of scandal in Peter Arne's life even before he was found beaten to death on August 1, 1983. Born in modern-day Malaysia to American and Swiss-French parents, and based out of the UK as an adult, Arne was a character actor who regularly played villains on film and TV. He also embezzled thousands of dollars from novelist Mary Renault through a scheme to build immigrant housing in South Africa in the 1940s. Arne's escape to his home country to dodge formal charges was accomplished in part by stealing Renault's car. He was more generous to Giuseppe Peruzzi in the 1980s. Peruzzi lived in a park near Arne's Knightsbridge home. At the time of his death, Arne was providing Peruzzi with food. As Arne's home showed no signs of forced entry, police concluded that he'd known his killer, and Peruzzi became the chief suspect. Peruzzi's body was found in the River Thames less than a week later. He died by suicide after killing Arne. Bizarre helicopter accidents, prop guns gone wrong, unsolved boating disasters, and surreal car crashes. All these things have ended the lives of beloved actors. Here are their strange stories. Anne Heche was perhaps best known for starring opposite Harrison Ford in the 1998 drama 6 Days, 7 Nights, and for her long-term relationship with Ellen DeGeneres. Throughout her career, Heche had been open about her belief that she had serious undiagnosed mental health issues stemming from a difficult childhood, and also about her past heavy drug use. Despite these issues, she amassed an enviable body of work as an actor. Unfortunately, her life came to an end in bizarre fashion on the morning of August 5, 2022. Heche was driving her Mini Cooper in a Los Angeles suburb when she inexplicably lost control of the vehicle and crashed into a private residence. The ensuing blaze was so intense that it took 20 minutes for firefighters to beat the flames back enough to move the car. Miraculously, Heche initially survived, hanging on for nearly a week before succumbing to her injuries on August 11th. Investigators suspected at first that the crash was due to drugs or alcohol, but this was not the case. In December, the LA coroner's office announced that there was no evidence pointing to Heche being impaired in any way at the time of the accident. Brandon Lee, had he lived, may have eclipsed even his famous father Bruce Lee in star power. Like his dad, Brandon Lee was an explosively talented martial artist, possessed with a ton of charisma and a formidable screen presence. His early features, such as 1991's Showdown in Little Tokyo and 1992's Rapid Fire, were proof positive of these qualities. But it was his breakthrough lead role in the 1994 supernatural thriller The Crow, an adaptation of the 1989 indie comic of the same name, that made him a household name. It was also his final role, as his life was cut short due to a freak accident with just 2 weeks of filming left. Lee was killed when he was shot in the abdomen by a prop gun fired by actor Michael Massey, a gun which had been improperly handled and which contained a portion of a dummy round in one of its chambers. Lee was only 28 years old, and although Massey was found to have not been at fault, he never truly recovered after Brandon Lee's death.
What happened to Brandon was a tragic accident. It's something that I'm gonna live with.
The Crow went on to become a box office success and a cult classic, but one can't help but wonder what might have been if the circumstances that led to its star's death had played out differently. Former child actor Anton Yelchin had made a name for himself with minor roles on film and television before breaking out at the age of 17 with his performance in the brutal 2006 drama Alpha Dog. Just 3 years later, he landed the role of Pavel Chekhov in J.J. Abrams' Star Trek reboot, reprising the role in that film's 2 sequels. High-profile appearances in Terminator, Salvation, and the acclaimed thriller Green Room followed. His was a star on the rise until the incident that took his life in 2016. The actor had parked his 2015 Jeep Cherokee in his driveway and was checking his mail when the vehicle slipped out of gear and rolled toward him. It slammed him into a security fence, pinning him there, where he died at the scene from asphyxiation and blunt injuries. He was just 27 years old. Unbeknownst to Yelchin, the vehicle in question was under recall at the time and had a known issue with rolling away just as Yelchin's did that day. In 2018, the automaker settled a lawsuit brought by Yelchin's parents, though the terms of the settlement were not disclosed. With his steely good looks and intimidating presence, David Carradine carved out a decades-long career in film and television. He was a mainstay in westerns before famously starring in the TV series Kung Fu, and while many of his 80s and 90s credits consisted of TV guest spots in B-movies, he experienced a serious career resurgence in the early 2000s. Carradine played the title role in Quentin Tarantino's feature epic Kill Bill, and appeared in guest roles in hit TV shows like Medium and Alias. In 2009, his life was cut short. He was found dead in the closet of a hotel room in Bangkok, Thailand. While authorities first suspected death by suicide, this turned out not to be accurate. It's since been alleged that Carradine was instead partaking in the dangerous practice known as autoerotic asphyxiation. The finding was bolstered by court documents filed in his divorce from his ex-wife Marina Anderson, in which she alluded to Carradine's history of, quote, deviant sexual behavior. Several projects featuring Carradine were released posthumously, including the thriller The American Connection, which began production in 2007 but didn't see release until 2021. Hollywood legend Vic Morrow was perhaps best known as the star of the 60s TV series Combat. He had settled into a career of supporting roles when he was tapped to lend his considerable skill to Twilight Zone the movie, a feature film revival of the iconic TV series. In the lead-off segment, Time Out, Morrow portrayed Bill Connors, an unrepentant racist who finds himself supernaturally thrust into the shoes of people he's persecuted in the past. In one scene, he was to play a Vietnamese peasant during the Vietnam War, frantically attempting to rescue two children as a U.S. Army helicopter fires on them. The scene was cut after its filming went tragically wrong. Pyrotechnics used in the scene caused damage to the helicopter, causing veteran pilot Dorsey Wingo to lose control of the craft, which crashed directly on top of Morrow and two child actors, killing all three. In a first for Hollywood, the segment's director John Landis, producer George Folsey Jr., Wingo, and two others were tried criminally for their actions on set. After a sensational 10-month-long trial, all parties involved were acquitted.
It was just a wonderful time, and I wish we could get the jurors close for a minute. I want to kiss at least half of them.
Natalie Wood was an actor who bridged the gap between old and new Hollywood. As a child, she appeared in the 1947 edition of Miracle on 34th Street. As a teenager, she co-starred with James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause, and she portrayed Maria in the classic 1961 musical West Side Story. By the late 60s and 70s, she had successfully transitioned to adult fare like the comedy Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice, and in the early 80s, she was tapped to star in the sci-fi thriller Brainstorm. This would be her final role, due to a fateful yacht trip with her husband Robert Wagner and her co-star Christopher Walken. By all accounts, Wood and Wagner got into a drunken argument aboard the boat during the night of November 28, 1981. Wood somehow ended up overboard, and her body was found the next morning a mile from the yacht. Authorities ruled the death accidental, but the investigation was reopened in 2011. 7 years later, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department officially named Wagner as a person of interest in her death. Although he's always denied any wrongdoing, there are those who believe Wagner killed Natalie Wood.
They reopened the Natalie Wood thing. Do you have a comment on that?
No, I never did.
In 2020, Wood's biographer Suzanne Finstad claimed to have unearthed new witnesses who had information that would prove that Wood's death was no accident. But as of mid-2024, the case is still unresolved. Giancarlo Coppola, the son of Hollywood icon Francis Ford Coppola, was just beginning to make his presence known in Hollywood. As a boy, he appeared in bit parts in his father's classics like The Godfather and Apocalypse Now, and as a young man, he popped up in a larger role in 1983's Rumblefish. He also worked as a producer on the classic 1983 coming-of-age film The Outsiders, and was working as a camera operator on Gardens of Stone in 1986, when a tragic boating mishap took place during a break from shooting. Coppola and Griffin O'Neill, the son of actor Ryan O'Neill, had been drinking and were riding in a boat that attempted to cut between two others. They failed to realize that the rear boat was actually being towed by the lead one. Both young men came into contact with the tow line. O'Neill survived the accident, but 22-year-old Coppola was driven into the floor of the craft and suffered fatal head injuries.
But you can't make good memories on the water unless you know how to boat safely.
If I'd taken a course, I'd have some better memories.
In a 2020 interview with Vulture, Francis Ford Coppola cited Gardens of Stone as the one film he wishes he had never made, saying, "It cost me everything, and that was one of the movies I made at a time when I had to make a movie every year to just keep my house and my household together. I fantasize about having not made Gardens of Stone. I wouldn't have lost my son."
Hi, I'm Jane Dornacker, traffic reporter for WNBC.
Jane Dornacker was a woman of many talents. She began her career in show business as a comedian, then briefly performed with a band called Layla and the Snakes before joining legendary Bay Area rockers The Tubes in the late 70s. In 1983, she launched her acting career, appearing in a small role in The Right Stuff, and was also known for her stints as a radio traffic reporter for KFRC San Francisco, and later for WNBC New York City. In April 1986, a helicopter she was riding in crashed into the Hackensack River, but she and her pilot managed to swim to safety. She was not as lucky in a second crash just months later. Dornacker was in the middle of her traffic report when, according to witnesses, the aircraft simply stalled out and plummeted into the Hudson River. Emergency responders were on the scene within minutes, but Dornacker was unresponsive when pulled from the water, and she was later pronounced dead at a local hospital. One of the great actors of Hollywood's golden age, William Holden appeared in many classics over several decades, from Billy Wilder's 1950 opus Sunset Boulevard to Sidney Lumet's 1976 masterpiece Network. He was the quintessential old-school actor, and like many of his peers, he was a bit of a drinker. This, unfortunately, was a factor in the accident that led to his death in 1981. Holden was drinking alone in his Hollywood apartment when he apparently slipped on a throw rug, smacking his head on a bedside table. Still conscious, Holden tried to tend to the 2-inch gash on his forehead with a few tissues, to no avail. He passed out, and he soon bled to death. The coroner who attended to Holden would later say that he registered a blood alcohol level of 0.22 and was likely unaware of just how badly he had hurt himself. He further noted that although Holden probably lived for about half an hour after sustaining the injury, it appeared that he had not tried to call for help. John Eric Hexum was practically made for the lead role in a series that could only have been created in the 80s, Cover Up, in which he portrayed a former Green Beret turned model who, accompanied by a fashion photographer played by Jennifer O'Neill, conducted covert intelligence operations around the globe. The series lasted only one season, but Hexum only appeared in 7 episodes. He was fatally injured on set after a tragic accident between scenes. The cast was filming in October 1984 when they learned there would be a delay in shooting the next scene. According to witnesses, Hexum asked his castmates, "Can you believe this crap?" before picking up a prop pistol, holding it to his head, and pulling the trigger. The blast fractured his skull and propelled a bone fragment into his brain, and despite the best efforts of doctors to save him, he was declared brain dead 6 days later. Perhaps the only silver lining, Hexum was an organ donor. His heart saved the life of a former Navy SEAL and father of 2. His kidneys saved 2 more lives, and his corneas gave sight to 2 more people. Jack Nance enjoyed a 3-decade career in film and television, but he'll forever be associated with the role of Henry Spencer, the protagonist of David Lynch's surrealist 1977 masterpiece Eraserhead. The actor landed steady work throughout the 80s and 90s, and continued to work with Lynch in projects such as the iconic TV series Twin Peaks, as well as Lynch's big screen features. In 1997, a trip down the street from his home in Pasadena to a local donut shop cost Nance his life. Witnesses told authorities that Nance got into a verbal altercation with 2 men outside the shop, which turned physical. Nance was punched in the head, but walked away from the scene, returning to his apartment. He was found dead the following morning at his home by a friend who came by to check on him. The cause of death was ruled to be blunt force trauma to the head. No one was charged with the crime.
The fact that Jack's death was an unsolved homicide in some kind of quirky way, I think he would have loved that.
Speaking with the press, Nance's old friend Lynch did not seem terribly surprised, telling reporters, "Jack always said he wouldn't be too hard to kill."
Horror movies have a reputation for being unlucky, and some are even said to be cursed. That's all cute to say, but when those curses lead to actual fatalities, it's not very cutesy anymore. Poltergeist is a classic tale of people who live in a house built on a cemetery, who are haunted by toy clowns, partially eaten by trees, and sucked into intradimensional closets. In other words, it's a clear metaphor for life in American suburbia. Anyway, the Poltergeist franchise has been linked to so many fatal illnesses, homicides, and other tragedies that most people have lost count. And the first was Dominique Dunne, who played the haunted family's teenage daughter. Dunne was strangled by her ex-boyfriend in 1982, the same year Poltergeist debuted in American theaters. Sadly, it was her first and only big screen role. The star of the original Poltergeist franchise was Heather O'Rourke, the adorable little girl who got sucked into her closet and then ended up inexplicably inside a television set. O'Rourke starred in 3 Poltergeist movies before passing away suddenly at the age of 12, just before the last movie in the trilogy was released. According to the LA Times, O'Rourke had an undiagnosed intestinal stenosis, a severe bowel obstruction that led to infection and septic shock. Doctors said O'Rourke's condition had been present at birth, so in other words, way before the poltergeist curse, and probably not supernatural in origin. Still, the timing was a little bizarre, which is probably what gave the whole curse thing its legs. The scary evil preacher in Poltergeist 2 wasn't quite as iconic as the terrifying clown, but he still registered at least a 9 on the creepometer, and for many people is the most memorable element of the film.
Are you lost, sweetheart?
Julian Beck, who portrayed the preacher, passed away during post-production, thus proving once and for all that no one should ever be in a Poltergeist movie, ever. Except he was actually terminally ill during filming. The sunken eyes, the yellowish skin, and the skeletal frame that helped make the character so terrifying weren't special effects. They were symptoms of late-stage cancer. Beck was diagnosed with stomach cancer years before Poltergeist 2 premiered, so his passing was no great surprise to anyone and therefore not the result of a curse. The Exorcist is one of the most terrifying films of all time, and it was also associated with a ton of bizarre incidents, including a fire that burned down most of the set and a lightning strike that took out a 400-year-old cross on church grounds directly across the street from where the movie was premiering. According to The Guardian, the film was also associated with the tragic loss of 9 people, from the night watchman to a special effects professional. Most notably, actor Jack McGowan, who played Burke Dennings, succumbed to complications of influenza during the 1973 London epidemic. That's not an uncommon way to go, but McGowan passed away right around the time of the premiere and 8 people followed him, including actress Vasiliki Maliaros, who played Father Damien Karras' ailing mother. Actor Bela Lugosi was best known for playing horror villains. He tried to land other roles, but his Hungarian accent was limiting in an era where audiences thought all Central European accents were Transylvanian. In 1956, Lugosi shot some test scenes for Ed Wood, who you might remember as the Golden Turkey Award-winning worst filmmaker in history. But just after that, the actor succumbed to a heart attack, and Wood was left with just a few minutes of footage. Wood inexplicably decided to turn the shots into a feature-length zombie flick called Plan 9 from Outer Space, and he also put aliens in it because, hey, everyone loves aliens. There was so little Lugosi footage available that Wood hired a double to fill in for his deceased star and made him walk around with a cape over his face. That's the story of how Bela Lugosi became the post-mortem star of the worst movie of all time. Singer Aaliyah had just finished filming Queen of the Damned when she was involved in a plane crash in the Bahamas. According to Billboard, the plane was carrying more passengers than it was certified to carry, it was overloaded by about 700 pounds, and it was operated by a company that wasn't licensed in the Bahamas. The pilot had recently been in trouble for possession of crack cocaine. Investigators believed the plane crashed simply because there was too much weight, which led to the pilot losing control. Ultimately, Aaliyah's death wasn't due to any kinds of supernatural forces, but a tragic case of human error.
Being a movie star brings great fame and fortune, but not immortality. Some actors have fallen prey to illness or accident at the height of their fame, like the following ones who died after filming big box office hits. Few performers have ever reached, or will ever reach, the career heights of Robin Williams. After breaking through in the 70s as a stand-up comedian, he became a TV star in Mork and Mindy and then a movie star in the 80s and beyond. He could play pretty much anybody, from a mournful college professor in Good Will Hunting to a film developer turned stalker in 1 Hour Photo. Sadly, Williams took his own life at the age of 63 in 2014, but he still had some work coming audiences' way. He'd completed shooting his scenes in 4 films, all of which would eventually see release. There was the holiday dramedy A Merry Friggin' Christmas, the indie drama Boulevard, and the sci-fi comedy Absolutely Anything, where he provided the voice of a dog. But his most high-profile posthumous film was Night at the Museum's Secret of the Tomb, the third and final installment in the trilogy in which museum exhibits come to life. Once more, Williams played American president and legendary adventurer Teddy Roosevelt. Like its predecessor, Secret of the Tomb was a big hit, raking in $353 million worldwide.
The key to happiness, to true happiness, is...
Philip Seymour Hoffman was one of the most acclaimed, prolific, and versatile actors of his generation. A 4-time Academy Award nominee, he won the prize for 2005's Capote. He also appeared in blockbusters like Mission Impossible 3, as well as critical darlings like The Talented Mr. Ripley and Punch Drunk Love. But there was a darker side to Hoffman off-screen. He struggled with substance abuse issues, and on February 2, 2014, he was discovered dead in his apartment. The cause was an accidental overdose of drugs, with heroin, cocaine, and amphetamines found in his system. At the time of his death, he'd nearly completed his filming schedule for Mockingjay Part 2, the final movie in the Hunger Games series. He played Plutarch Heavensbee, an underground revolutionary leader helping to overthrow a tyrannical government. He had 8 days of filming left, so director Francis Lawrence had to make adjustments, including using a stunt double when possible. Heath Ledger advanced up the Hollywood ladder rather quickly. His first big roles were love interest and action heroes in the likes of 10 Things I Hate About You and A Knight's Tale. By 2005, he had established himself as one of the best actors in Hollywood, particularly after his Oscar-nominated performance in Brokeback Mountain. That only increased his visibility and bankability, which were on full display when Christopher Nolan cast him as the Joker in The Dark Knight, the second installment in his epic Batman trilogy. Ledger completely committed himself to the role, resulting in one of the most unforgettable performances in comic book movie history.
You complete me.
That commitment unfortunately led to severe insomnia, which Ledger treated with prescription medication, and that may have led to his death. In January 2008, the 28-year-old actor was found unresponsive in his New York apartment. According to the New York City Medical Examiner, he died of acute intoxication by the combined effects of sleeping pills, painkillers, and anti-anxiety medications. About 6 months later, The Dark Knight was released and earned more than $530 million domestically, making it the highest-grossing film of 2008. Ledger's performance would go on to posthumously earn him the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, which his family accepted on his behalf. Richard Harris is considered the very face of a serious English actor, even though he was, in fact, Irish. Over the course of his career, he earned 2 Oscar nominations, one for 1963's This Sporting Life and another for 1990's The Field. He also won a Golden Globe for portraying King Arthur in the 1967 musical Camelot. He was one of the many luminaries of the performing arts who was cast in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, the first film in the Wizarding series. He provided the warmth and gravitas necessary to portray Albus Dumbledore, the long-bearded headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. He reprised the role for the second film, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, only to be replaced by Michael Gambon for the rest of the franchise. That was because on October 25, 2002, Harris passed away at the age of 72, following a 2-month battle with Hodgkin's disease. Chamber of Secrets hit theaters the following month and promptly earned $879 million worldwide. Despite a tragically short career, Bruce Lee broke a lot of ground in cinema. He opened doors for actors of Asian descent while also popularizing martial arts films, thanks to his unforgettable fight sequences. He was born in San Francisco, the son of a Chinese opera star father. As a child, he appeared in about 20 Chinese films while also studying dance and kung fu. After opening a martial arts school in Seattle, he decided to try his luck in Hollywood and found his breakthrough role in 1966 on the ABC show The Green Hornet as the sidekick Kato. With his dynamic moves, he usually overshadowed his co-star Van Williams. Unable to find many decent roles in the United States, Lee hit the Hong Kong film industry and became a star with such movies as Fist of Fury and The Way of the Dragon, the latter of which he also wrote and directed. His signature film was the martial arts classic Enter the Dragon, which hit American theaters in August 1973, about a month after Lee died from brain edema in Hong Kong at the age of 32. Enter the Dragon proved to be a big part of his legacy as it went on to rake in over $300 million worldwide. John Ritter first gained fame as clumsy chef Jack Tripper on the mega-hit sitcom Three's Company. He would go on to star in plenty of other notable TV projects, including the miniseries adaptation of Stephen King's It and the ABC sitcom 8 Simple Rules for Dating My Teenage Daughter. He tried mightily to establish a movie career as well, but it didn't quite work out, give or take a problem child. That is, until he met Billy Bob Thornton on the set of Hearts of Fire, who cast Ritter against type as a troubled dollar store manager in the stark drama Sling Blade. The two teamed up again for the raunchy comedy Bad Santa. Opposite Thornton's boozy mall Santa, Ritter played the perpetually nervous mall manager.
Wait, no. You don't What? No.
The film grossed $60 million at the domestic box office and has gone on to be a perennial holiday favorite. It was released in November 2003, just 2 months after Ritter died at the age of 54 of a heart ailment after experiencing chest pain on the set of 8 Simple Rules. In the 70s and 80s, Jill Clayburgh was earning critical raves for portraying women in the midst of transition. She earned back-to-back Academy Award nominations in 1979 and 1980 for her work in the thoughtful, divorce-oriented dramas An Unmarried Woman and Starting Over. By the 2000s, she had shifted mainly to television as she added dignity and legitimacy to the likes of The Practice and Dirty Sexy Money. In 2010, she worked on what would be her final film, Bridesmaids. She wasn't particularly known for comedy, but she nevertheless managed to deliver some laughs as the mother of Kristen Wiig's Annie. Bridesmaids went on to earn $169 million at the domestic box office in 2011, making it one of the most popular comedies of the 20th century. It even earned a couple of Oscar nominations. Unfortunately, Kleberg didn't get to see all that as she passed away from leukemia on November 5, 2010 at the age of 66. Robert Loggia put together a long career as the definitive type of character actor who makes you go, hey, it's that guy.
That's Robert Loggia. R as in Robert Loggia. O as in, oh my God, it's Robert Loggia.
He had credited roles in more than 200 films and TV series, dating back to a 1951 episode of the soap opera Search for Tomorrow. In the 80s, he seemed to be in just about everything, specializing as grizzled good guys, tough bad guys, and imposing bosses. He earned an Oscar nomination for his role as private detective Sam Ransom in the 1985 courtroom drama Jagged Edge. But he's likely best known for playing a toy company chief in 1988's Big, as well as General Gray in the 1996 blockbuster Independence Day. Loggia had completed filming his scenes as General Gray in the long-awaited sequel, Independence Day Resurgence, when he died in December 2015 at age 85. He'd been coping with Alzheimer's disease for 5 years. While not quite as big a hit as its predecessor, it still managed to gross a hefty $389 million worldwide. John Cazale boasts a perfect film resume. There isn't one commercial or critical blemish on it. In fact, every single movie that he appeared in was nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars, and all of them are widely regarded as classics and prime examples of the dark and gritty cinematic movement of the 70s. Cazale made his big screen debut as two-timing Fredo Corleone in The Godfather, a role he reprised in The Godfather Part 2.
Oh, no, that was nothing, Mike. Now, Mo didn't mean nothing by that. Sure, he flies off the handle once in a while, but Mo and me were good friends, right, Mo?
Cazale's 3 other Lifetime credits consist of Dog Day Afternoon, The Conversation, and The Deer Hunter. In March 1978, he died of cancer at age 42, several months before the release of The Deer Hunter, his final film. He'd already received his grim terminal diagnosis when filming began, and the studio wanted to replace him, as Cazale's insurance for the movie was prohibitively expensive. But his co-star Robert De Niro threatened to leave the production if that happened, and he footed the insurance bill himself. The film went on to win the Oscar for Best Picture and earned $49 million at the box office, a huge amount for a 3-hour-long drama about the Vietnam War.